Hey you all, Farmer Jesse here. Last week I went to Love and Fresh Flowers. My buddy Jennie Love, who hosts the No-Till Flowers podcast. It's her farm, it's in Philadelphia. It's amazing. So we shot a tour video and a bunch of other stuff about no-till flowers. She does JADAM, she does KNF, she does all sorts of really awesome no-till techniques. So we do a tour and we're doing some other videos, so those will be coming up on the channel here shortly. It's starting to rain. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was paid for in part by a grant from Southern Sayre. Other than that, subscribe if you want to subscribe, like if you want to like. Some good videos on the way. Enjoy.
Right, so welcome to Love and Fresh Flowers. This is my farm here located in Philadelphia. It's a little over 5 acres of land that I have in total that I'm stewarding, but at the moment it's only about 4 acres in production between all the different fields that I have. What's really unique about my farm is that it is located on the original farmland for William Penn way back when Pennsylvania and America was first colonized. Before that, it was Lenape land, and I always like to honor their spirit as well because I'm sure they took great care of the space. So, but I have a farm that's really dedicated to specialty cut flowers and foliage. I really try to focus on fully no-till systems. I really try not to turn the soil or disturb the soil in any way. We're also certified naturally grown here, and I do a lot of JADAM and Korean natural farming practices as well. So there's lots to see and do, so let's take a tour. So here is my Woody's field, or one of 2 Woody's field. I have another one a little bit further away from here, but this is a relatively newly established Woody's field, which is really great to show you all so that you can get an idea of the bones of the space and exactly how I've laid it out and what's growing in there. So I'm gonna go on in. Here we are in the Woody's field. This is a relatively new field. It was planted in 2019, and then some things were planted in 2020. So everything's kind of at a newer stage of growth. But what's really great I wanted to show you is how I laid out this field. So the aisles, the green aisles here, are spaced at 60 inches wide. That's plenty of space because these plants are gonna get quite big with age. So for instance, here is a snowball viburnum. It's gonna get really, really big. I have some of these growing in another field and they're about 15 feet tall and they get really wide. So you need to leave nice wide aisles for your Woody's field so there's plenty of space to move around and they get good airflow. One thing that I would recommend is that you consider how you're going to mow these aisles when you're first laying out a Woody's field so that you get a nice width that matches your mower deck. So I have a mower deck that's 60 inches wide if I want to mow the whole aisle. So that's just something to consider when you're first laying out a field. And then one thing I also wanted to show you is I work really hard to encourage as much root photosynthesis happening as possible here in the field. So instead of mowing my aisles super low all the time, I actually have them planted with cover crops, a diverse forage mix of a lot of different things, and that was really helping. That root system is helping feed these young woody plants as well. So instead of just mowing everything down and making it sort of a parched space, it's really good to actually leave some stuff grow up taller and lots of photosynthesis happening here. So this is really my long game strategy for my farm, is to put as much into production with long-lived woody crops, perennial crops as possible. This has so many benefits, both to myself and to the ecosystem. It means that this field will never be turned over. The way it's planted now is going to continue to maintain and produce and support lots of wildlife through the rest of my lifetime, hopefully beyond my lifetime. So there's a lot of benefits to me as a farmer. I know I've heard Farmer Clara on Winter Growers ask farmers over and over again, how are you going to farm when you get older? And this is how I'm going to farm when I get older. This is basically my retirement plan, the way I'll be able to continue to farm, because there's no manual labor after it's all put in, and I'll just be able to harvest from these crops for years and years to come. So I had to think really strategically about what I was going to put in this field so that I knew it was stuff that would be useful over the long haul and it'll be really long lived. So that had a lot to do with what I selected for this field. Welcome to my annuals field. field. So my space at my farm is divided into exclusively woodies and then a lot of annuals in another field so that I don't disturb the woodies whenever I'm trying to plant perennials or annuals. So here we have, it's about an acre in this area surrounding me here. And this is where all of our dahlias, zinnias, cosmos, all those classic annual varieties are grown in this space. And you see we've got 2 hoop houses at the bottom for season extension as well. All right, so welcome to my propagation / perennial foliage hoop house. So this is a 21 by 48 tunnel, unheated tunnel. And so in here, my main focus is to be able to grow some perennial foliage that I can harvest from all season long. And then the space also shares with the propagation necessities that I use to start my own seeds and take cuttings and so forth here at the farm. So one of the biggest crops in here, which is very obvious on camera, is our eucalyptus. So we grow eucalyptus both in a tunnel and then also out in the field as an annual. This eucalyptus in the tunnel is several years old, which means it's very, very productive, much more productive than annual eucalyptus. And it's really great because I can continue to harvest from it through till about February, at which point I have to cut it down so it doesn't go through the roof. But it's really fantastic late winter foliage to use in floral designs. We also use it in Christmas wreaths and so forth. And we've also got Nandina in here, over here, Tree of Heaven. Really great foliage for floral design. It holds up really well out of water. Also something we can use in winter wreaths for sale. We've got rosemary and lavender in here and Dusty Miller, all 3 fantastic perennial foliages as well. And then we've got, over on the side, we've got artichokes, which are perennialized so that we can use the foliage and then also the flowers whenever they do flower in our floral designs as well. So there's just a lot of diversity and interesting stuff in here. And the reason I've put this in sort of the prime valuable space of a tunnel is because as a floral designer, as a farmer florist, ultimately, it's really hard to get foliage early in the season. So a lot of times farmers who are just getting into flowers will ask me or groan about the fact that they have nothing to put in their bouquets except tulips. You know, when you do tulips and you grow beautiful tulips, but then you try to make bouquets and you realize you have nothing else. So that's what this house is for. And one reason it's worth putting valuable space into this kind of production is so that now I have foliage for all of our spring weddings, for CSA bouquets and all that kind of stuff. So worth considering putting lots of foliage in your hoop houses. And then also it's just really great space for propagating in late winter. It's not a heated space, but we get away with a double layer of plastic on the roof. It's not on right now, for the record. And then we use heat mats. And I create a greenhouse within a greenhouse. So here on this space, we actually put more plastic over top of that, and that creates a nice little bubble. And then we're able to start growing the cooler annual stuff first, and then move our way into warmer stuff as time goes on. So, but it saves on heat, and it's also just better for the environment to not heat a whole big tunnel, but instead focus on a smaller space. So that's how we do propagating at Love and Fresh Flowers. Right, so now we're in our other high tunnel here. This is an unheated space as well. And this is where we do so much of our spring production. So right now it looks fairly bare around me, though there's lots and lots of baby plants in the ground at the moment because we're here in November. We just took out all our summer crops and now we have all the crops for the springtime. So in here at the moment we've got snapdragons, campanula, Icelandic poppies, ranunculus, stock, I forget what else. There's lots of stuff in here, but those are our main drivers. And so this is what we need to do spring weddings. And as a cut flower grower, you're going to need to think about how to get flowers to market sooner in the springtime, because people are hungry to buy flowers in the spring like there are no other time of the year. So you really want to hit the ground running and get spring flowers as soon as possible. So I try to maximize this space and put as many plants in here as I possibly can so I can cut as many stems out of here come springtime. So to that end, my campanula and my snapdragons are planted at 4-inch spacing, And then stock, oh yeah, fragrance stock is another crop in here. Stock is planted at 3-inch spacing. So there are thousands of plants in this space. The ranunculus, you still have to do 6 to 8 inches. They don't like being really packed in. But the spacing can be very tight if your soil is really healthy and active and the biology is churning. I wasn't able to do that tight of spacing in years past when I was growing more conventionally and I was tilling and the soil was really tired and lifeless. But now that I have had this particular tunnel space in no-till production for 3 seasons at this point, and I've really poured my heart and soul into rehabbing the soil. So we did a lot of cover cropping. I spent an entire year cover cropping the space, except right in the middle of the winter, and also have added lots of worm castings, liquid humates. I do a lot of KNF preparations in this space as well, things like JLF and JMS and different things like that, not to get too acronym heavy, but and so the biology in the soil is really humming, and as a result I can really pack in this tight spacing, which means in this row right here alone, this is Campanula. We harvest thousands of stems out of this one space. Campanula is a really high value crop, particularly if you can hit Easter and Mother's Day with it in some way or another. Then you can easily generate, I'd say, Campanula can do $2 a stem. So I would bet, I would have to pull my records to know for sure, but like $4,000 out of one bed, one crop, which is a winter grown crop, which means you can make a lot of money off of a pretty small space. This is just a 20-foot bed here. So yeah, you got to pack it in. Is basically the moral to the story. You got to get your soil biology humming first, and then pack it in and make that spring profit so that you can help support the farm through the rest of the year. All right, just one quick side note here to all the spring crops that we have in this house. This is Alstroemeria. It is a perennial that I have in this house because it won't really reliably come back in our zone out in the field, so I put it in the house. But what's really great about Alstroemeria is it's an incredibly common grocery store flower. So a lot of people have just a lot of flower farmers have just looked the other way because we're always taught not to grow super common things that you could get at the grocery store because that doesn't seem like good use of space. But I actually am here to advocate for Alstroemerias. They're incredibly easy to grow. They're actually really beautiful, so we'll get a close-up of this then, but they're really great in wedding work. This particular variety here is good. These are both in the Indian Summer series. I cannot remember the names right off the top of my head, but so it's really beautiful to work into floral design in a new way, and homegrown, farm-grown Alstroemeria looks so different than the stuff in the grocery stores that my customers don't even know it's the same thing. And the reason I love having it available for my customers is it's super long lasting. So when you want to get people hooked on your flowers as a flower farmer, you need to come up with crops that are going to last a really long time, because then people begin to associate your flowers with a lot more value than the ones that come from the grocery store. So Alstroemerias do that. They fit that niche, and then also they love hot weather. So right now it is November and we've turned the house over into spring crops, so it's not prime Alstroemeria time, but in the middle of the summer when it is baking in this house, so like well over 120 degrees in this house when we get really hot, these guys are thriving. They are going bonkers. They're blooming their heads off. They don't mind at all. So that's a really great way to include them in your crop plan in a hoop house, is to do what I do here, which is I grow them as a perennial and they bloom through the summer, and then once it gets really cold, so basically tomorrow night we're going to 30 degrees, this will cut them back for the year. So then we come in and we cut them to the ground, and we can plant over them, interplant, overplant, whichever one of those terms it is. We will plant poppies over these, Icelandic poppies, which will bloom in the springtime. We'll get a really nice flush of poppies over them. You could also put stock or any of these other crops that are in here over top of the perennial roots of Alstroemeria, get a really nice crop for the spring, and then these guys come back again to bloom through the heat of the summer. So I'm basically going to plan on, putting loads of Alstroemerias through my hoop house, because nothing else really, frankly, in the face of increasing summer heat, wants to live and be happy in a hoop house here in Philadelphia, at least. So that's my go Alstroemeria. Alright, so now we're down in my wooded area. My farm has about 2 acres of woodlot on a sloped space. So I had to get creative and clever with this area. So down in here is my shade garden, or what I like to call my forest farm. Inside this fence, the fence is just to keep the deer out, and lots of goodies down in here. And as time goes on, I'll be expanding this space in the farm, as it's a really great opportunity to grow specialty flowers and specialty foliage in the woods. So a forest farm is a great asset if you have the wooded area. But we're going to do a whole nother video just about this, and I'll take you through each individual crop that's growing in this space, so come back for that real soon. So now we're standing in my grass grove. I planted a whole swath of perennial grasses with the intention of using them for cuts. So there's a lot of really interesting native perennial grasses that you can include. And what's interesting about this is that florists really appreciate unique grasses. It's something you maybe would never really think about. You know, how many people really think about grass as as a crop? But grasses have such great texture. As you can see, they really catch the light in such a unique way. So I have a space here dedicated to different varieties of perennial grasses, and I just keep adding to that with time. So eventually it'll be quite a slope of grasses here. So now we're inside my barn, which is where all of the magic happens. So after we've harvested and conditioned the flowers, we bring them in here to do our design work. And so you're seeing the space where all the floral design for weddings happens, all the preparation for things like our subscription service happen, and also all our on-farm floral design workshops. So teaching on-farm workshops is a huge part of my business, and it's a great way that we use our flowers that actually has a tremendous profit margin in it. So I encourage you guys to consider doing on-farm workshops if you're inclined. But so that means that our space is really set up to be super flexible. We've got rolling tables here, so all of these come out, and we can basically, it's a modular system. I can set it up however I want to, but right now it's set up to do bouquet production if necessary. It's the end of the season, so we're not producing anything right now. But and then lots of open space with really good lighting, so that when we are designing or hosting workshops, everybody can really see what they're doing, which is a critical part of floral design. If you're going to be a farmer florist and you're a grower who then wants to design, make sure whatever space you set up is really inclined to helping you design well. So that's a little different than a pack wash station for a vegetable grower, where you probably don't really care what the lighting is, or it doesn't need to be super good. But when designing, you need lots of really good natural light. So don't try to design in basically a little hole. But yeah, and then we've got 2 coolers here in the barn, and we have 1 cooler outside as well, which gives me a lot of flexibility for how I can store different things at different temperatures. It's one of the splurges that I gave myself when I built this barn. This barn's 3 years old now. I wanted to have space to have multiple coolers. It has worked out really, really well, and I highly encourage other flower farmers to consider having multiple coolers instead of just 1 big cooler, because then you can set the temperature and the humidity to be really good for whatever crop you're trying to store. So we have 1 cooler that's really dedicated mostly to wedding designs when we're in the heart of our wedding season. 1 cooler is dedicated to just sort of general harvest, and then 1 cooler is dedicated to what we consider long-term storage for tulips and peonies in particular, or if there's maybe Lysianthus crop that I'm trying to really save for a wedding or so forth, I have a cooler that's really dedicated to long-term storage. So that's one of the the perks of having a flower farm. You've been well established, you can learn some things, and then implement your sort of dream space. So this is my dream space here. Well, that wraps up the tour. Thank you so much for coming along with me. It's been really fun to show you guys around. And if you want to see more of what I'm doing around here and just generally learn more about holistic regenerative flower production, I encourage you to tune in to No Till Flowers, which is my podcast, and just follow along over there for all the great information that is shared by myself and guests alike. So hopefully I'll see you there.